Good morning, Future Proof. How's everyone doing? Fantastic. Are you ready to nerd out on productivity data? Yeah. I brought numbers. There's a lot of them. I put them in charts so you don't have to read the numbers, though. My goal with you this morning is to share out some of the research that we have been doing over the past year or two on advisor technology and advisor productivity and some of the interesting intersections that show up between the two. There's I think an ever-growing focus on how do firms use technology, how do they use it most effectively, how do we lift our productivity, either because we're just trying to improve efficiency and profitability of the firm or because we don't want to have to hire quite as quickly as we otherwise do if we don't use technology efficiently, as well as all the other roles that show up around advisor technology. It actually has nothing to do with in-office efficiency. It's how are we showing up for clients? What kind of analysis work are we doing for clients? And that's actually where we started some of our research around this, that we found as we went out into the work that we were doing with advisors that we really do have remarkably different views around what technology is here to do in our advisory firms. The tech industry tends to talk almost exclusively about efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. And it certainly is an aspect, but when we looked broadly at the advisor community, we really found it showing up in 4 different domains. For some of us, technology is a time savings thing, right? It takes me 20 minutes to do this task, and if you can do it in 10 or 5 or make it go away, that's fantastic. I save time. I'm not even necessarily trying to get more efficient. Maybe I just want to go home earlier on Fridays, but I would like to not spend time doing things that I don't particularly enjoy doing that I wish I could automate. For some of us, it's not a time thing, it's much more directly a cost thing. This tends to show up a little bit more as firms get larger and we start hiring people to do the things that we're trying to let go of, and the people kind of cost some money. It's like it would be really nice if I could get some software that would make us more efficient, and then I wouldn't need quite as much staffing, and that improves the cost efficiency of my firm. Others are actually all the way out at the other end of the spectrum, though. No, this has nothing to do with my efficiency within the firm and the time and that it takes to do the planning work. It's that I want to go deeper in the planning work. I want to go deeper in the investment analysis. In fact, my dream is software that lets me spend more time with my clients, giving deeper, better advice and doing all sorts of cool analyses and strategies that I might not have even been able to do if I didn't get the next new tool. Right, quintessential point in modern environment is probably, I used to do the financial planning software, but I wanted to get deeper in tax, and now I have Holistic Planner, FP Alpha, and I added like a whole other thing to my tech stack to do more for my clients. Often very valuable, often very rewarding, but there wasn't a lot of time savings by saying, let's start analyzing every client's tax return. We do that for different reasons. And then for some of us, it's much more about the client experience. This is the subset of us that focus a lot on how does the software show up in the meeting? What is the client logging into? What is their portal? What is their experience? Can we improve client communication through technology? I'm not trying to do it for efficiency or time savings. I'm trying to do it for higher touch. So I'm actually going to put this out to all of you. What do you actually view as the primary role in your firm? And this is very individual use. So not just like however your firm wants to use technology. What do you personally believe is the most important role that technology can play within your practice? At the individual level for you. So you can either use the QR code up here, or you can go to slido.com and enter the code, which is Kitces Research. And if our technology is cooperating with us today, fingers crossed, you will have a poll coming up on your phone that you are able to answer about, from your perspective, what is the primary role that technology should be playing? So we'll give a moment for our results coming in. Is technology cooperating with us today? Oh, it's always the beautiful thing. You gotta love a technology session where the technology is not cooperating. So just in case, I had a little bit of data on this, on what we see broadly across the advisor community. So we do a series of tech studies every other year, where we'll go out to usually about 1,000 to 1,500 advisors, put them through a very lengthy questionnaire of all the things they do with their tech in their firm. For those of you who completed our surveys, thank you very much. Appreciate your participation. We winnow that down to firms that meet a pretty strict criteria about how complete the responses have to be in order to be usable for us. We end up with usually about 700 or 800 people that we use results from. And this is what we actually found were responses from the advisor community at large. Now, the striking thing here is the whole domain of cost and time efficiency actually only shows up for about 1 in 5 of us. 7% said cost, 14% said time. It's barely 20%. 4 out of 5 advisors in practice are not trying to use technology to just get faster and cheaper. We're doing it to get better. Deeper relationships with clients, higher touch, better experience, new areas where we want to do advice and planning work. With quality optimization, this just like, how do I get better at doing the planning and investment things for clients, being the overwhelming dominating factor. This was pretty striking to us because while I've not done a formal survey on it, I'm pretty sure if I go out to, say, the top 100 vendors in the advisor tech space and look at their websites about what they say their value proposition is, it's not this. We actually have a pretty significant misalignment, I think, already, that a lot of tech vendors, it's in the simplest sense, they're selling efficiency instead of quality, and most of us are buying quality instead of efficiency. Now, the more striking thing is we then went and took this data and we said, let's see how productive these firms actually are. So the primary way that we measure productivity in our research is that we look at how much revenue is handled by either each advisor professional that is client-facing, and also just looking at how much revenue does the firm have relative to its total headcount in the firm. So you can think about your own numbers for a moment, like just take your gross revenue, absolute top line before anything comes out, divide by the number of advisors who are in a client-facing role, and you get your revenue per advisor. So for most of us, this is like senior advisor, service advisor, not necessarily the associates who support the senior folks. If they're mostly behind the scenes, we don't put them in that advisor number. People that actually have to deal with, like, the client is freaking out and wants to sell out of the market. Anyone who answers that phone call goes in the advisor number. So you can take your gross revenue and divide by that. You'll get a number on revenue per advisor in your firm. And then you can do the same thing by taking your gross revenue and just dividing by total headcount of everybody in the firm. Ideally, do this kind of full-time equivalence. If you got 3 half-timers, it's 1.5 in total. Put yourself in this number as well. If you are if you are client-facing, you are one of the advisors. You are certainly one of the total team. So here's what we find. When we look at advisory firms in these productivity metrics, either revenue per advisor, which is the dark blue line, or revenue per employee, which is the lighter blue bar, it turns out that all the firms buying tech for cost and time efficiency are actually on average about 40% less productive than everybody else. If that sounds weird, you are correct. Like, we would have thought it would go the other way. Firms focus on technology for productivity reasons are actually less productive. When we boil down to how much revenue are they actually generating by doing all the things that the people in their firm do to provide services that generate revenue. Now, this is not because, like, tech is bad. I'm not trying to bash tech or tech efficiency in and of itself. But the key distinction here is that firms that focus on tech for cost and time efficiency, generally in principle, are trying to figure out how to minimize how much time they're spending with clients. Right? That's kind of the whole point. I'm trying to do the things faster and get on more quickly to the next client so that I can increase my client capacity, have fewer staff members, have fewer interactions that require time, because that improves my productivity. The firms that go to the other end, that focus on client experience or quality optimization, tend to go deeper with their clients. No. The purpose of my tech, I don't want to go from 100 clients to 200 clients. I want to go from 100 clients to 60. And I want 60 awesome clients. And it turns out that works much better. Because another way to look at revenue productivity is to simply say, let's look at the productivity of advisors by how affluent their clients are. That's what you're looking at here. So the vertical axis is how productive the advisors are, and the horizontal axis is the average AUM of the clients that they were working with. And you kind of notice a very direct linear pattern. Higher dollar clients pay more. Not really news. Most of us kind of felt this particularly in AUM world. You kind of notice that like my $1 million clients pay twice as much as my $500,000 clients, and I don't really do twice the work. That's the point. Not to abuse them, it's that $1 million clients do tend to have a little bit more in complexity than $500,000 clients, so they might appreciate a financial plan that goes deeper into their issues and nuances. $2 million clients tend to have more than $1 million client complexity. $5 million clients tend to have $2 million more complexity than $2 million clients. Even beyond the complexity, it turns out that when clients get more affluent, some of them just actually are willing to pay a little more for higher touch service, which goes the opposite direction when we're using tech to minimize interactions with clients through efficiency. And so it's not that firms that are using tech are like literally causing themselves to be less efficient, like the tech isn't making them able to get through their tasks more quickly. It's that firms that focus on tech for efficiency tend to drag themselves down market to clients who pay less in fees in the first place. And firms that invest into tech that lifts them into more sophisticated, more complex clients tend to move up market. And while you do have to do more work for higher dollar clients, we find this very clearly in our data. Higher dollar clients do expect more touch points, more hours of service, more interactions, more planning, but it is not 2x the services for 2x the assets. And so you start to get a very significant productivity lift. In fact, if we just reverse engineer this into, given the amount of hours that advisors typically spend with clients, I can take the total revenue that you generate, divide by how many hours you spend doing client-facing things, and figure out effectively what we're earning on an hourly rate as service professionals. Almost none of us charge hourly, but at the end of the day, we charge fees, we do things, they decide whether it's worthwhile based on the time of the services that was spent with them, so the numbers are actually quite consistent. And what we find is advisors that work with mass affluent clients generate about $250 to $300 an hour, which is pretty much a normal professional services wage. Advisors that start working with clients that are multimillionaires start generating closer to $400 to $600 an hour. And advisors that are working with clients that are $3 to $5 million and up are generating $700 to $1,000 an hour. And in the simplest sense, it is a lot easier to lift productivity by going from $250 an hour to $750 an hour than doing $250 an hour tasks faster. So what we find as sort of the first layer of this research is that in the simplest sense, if you are trying to lift productivity in the firm, it is much easier to average up than efficiency up. It's easier to go from having 100 clients with $500,000 to 100 clients with $1 million than it is to go from 100 clients with $500,000 to 200 clients with $500,000. Tech can handle incrementally, but it only goes so far. And part of the reason it only goes so far is a lot of what we do with clients at the end of the day is meetings and phone calls and other communication interactions. And no matter how awesome the tech is, I cannot get the tech to the point where I just show the client the answer and they're like, oh, I see. And 5 minutes later, they've done all of my recommendations. Right? There's like this fundamental constraint that client meetings don't really get shorter. We can make them a little more efficient sometimes depending on how we manage a meeting. But client meetings only ever get so short because clients need time to actually get the buy-in, to do the things, to make the implementations, to get the better outcomes, to say, oh my gosh, I love my advisor because of all the great outcomes that I'm having. And so when firms also try to efficiency up, they end up getting constrained because I might make the work in between the meetings faster, but I can't make the meetings all that much faster. And most of us just flat out could not double the number of meetings in our calendar. Either there's literally not enough room, or we technically could, but you would be living a world of 5 to 7 client meetings a day, 5 days a week, which most of us find exhausting. 1 or 2 of you are like, yeah, that would be awesome. Everybody else is like, oh my God, that sounds awful. But there's just only so many hours you can spend like being emotionally invested into client conversations before it just gets tiring. So averaging up drives more productivity lifts than efficiencying up, because you're effectively lifting your hourly rate as a professional, which is important because it leads you down very different paths about what drives productivity gains in the firm. Because now you're talking about training, knowledge, education, designations, advanced planning software, specialized planning tools, a whole different range of stuff than I wish I could get my workflow in my CRM to be 2 steps more efficient. Not that that doesn't matter incrementally, but that 2% swing is not going to materially change your client capacity. Being able to take on higher dollar clients does. Now, the other thing that we wanted to delve into with our research is what actually drives satisfaction with our technology tools and our tech stack. The biggest thing we actually do in our technology study is we give our advisors an opportunity to rate their satisfaction on all the different things that they're using in their tech stack. We end out with satisfaction scores across almost 500 different vendors, all the ones that we track on the AdvisorTech map, for those of you who've seen our crazy map of logos. So we ask every single one of those companies, are you using it? And if so, what do you think of it? And so on the one hand, we just get an interesting set of data on what the satisfaction is across various vendors in the industry. We put that out in a study that actually we are releasing today in coordination with our friends here at Future Proof. But we also did a little bit further analysis to try to figure out what actually is it that is driving the satisfaction, right? It's one thing just to say, I like vendor A, but I don't like vendor B. And it's another thing to say, well, in the aggregate, what leads advisors to be more or less satisfied with their technology? So I'm going to try this once more. We're going to see whether the technology is cooperating with us now. So the question to you is, across all the things that your tech stack does, from cost efficiency, speeding up your time, better client experience, deeper advice, on a 1 to 10 scale, 1 frowny face, 10 happy face, how satisfied are you with your tech stack as you experience it in your firm? Oh, yay, the technology is cooperating with us now. How satisfied are you with your tech stack? Ideally, make your own decision before you look at everybody else's numbers. I know some of you are like, I'm going to see what everyone else says. Try to answer your own first. But the joy of live polling is it comes right up. So, some notes as results come in. There are literally like 4 of you in this entire space that actually rated your tech 10 out of 10. There are like hundreds of you here. So for anyone who's wondering, like, someone out there has tech they love, I just have to get mine a little bit better. No one out there has tech they love. I guess if you're one of the 10s, like, you can raise your hand and we'll all come mass around you later and try to figure out what the heck you're doing. Almost no one is actually all that satisfied with their tech. Right, median score here is 7 out of 10. And the tail is much longer to the left than it is to the right. Right, there are more people who rate 3 out of 10 than 9 or 10 out of 10. Now, we're not all generally hating it. We're kind of upper middle range here. There's a lot of 6, 7s, and 8s. It's not like we're all at 3s and 4s and 5s. But if you're feeling like your tech you're struggling a little with your tech, I'm like, it kind of does okay, but there's all these other things I wish you could do a little bit better, and I'm a little bit frustrated with it. Congratulations, you and literally everybody else. I mean, it is the state of advisor technology right now. You're not missing magic that everybody else has figured out. We're all navigating through this together. Now, our broad results to the research were exactly the same as what we just saw on the screen. When we did this across our 1,000+ advisor sample, median satisfaction score was 7.3. Almost exactly where all of you just were. Now, the next thing that we did was we tried to break down what's going on in these firms that makes some of them more successful with their tech than others. So being the research nerds that we are, we took all the satisfaction scores, we dumped them into a fancy analytical tool, we cross-referenced it against basically every bit of demographic and other data we could possibly find, and tried to see what showed up as significant. So what you're looking at here, what I'm going to share in a moment, this is not like we thought these things would impact advisor technology and then we went and looked. We took like 200 factors, dumped them in, and let the data tell us which ones actually show up as statistically significant in driving outcomes. So 5 drivers that we ultimately found that are really impacting satisfaction scores. The number one, not surprisingly, I think either to any of us or to any vendors in the room, integration really is our number one driver about how satisfied we are. The best integrated firms tend to have the highest scores, and the least integrated firms tend to have the lowest scores. And overall, if you just look at like how wide that bar is for integration at the top, it is the single largest determinant. It swings our satisfaction score more in one direction than or the other than anything else that we measured. So the integration really does matter. Number two is a factor that we ultimately called incorporation. How much tech are you incorporating into your practice overall? How many things do you still do manually, and how many things are you fulfilling with tech? So this is things like some firms still have a fairly manual billing process, others have automated with technology. Some of us still call our clients to schedule meetings, others are using Calendly. So we looked at how many different elements of your business, from the big stuff that almost all of us use tech for, like CRM systems and financial planning software, down to even the little things like, do you have tech to facilitate your compliance, or is it still manual? Are you scheduling meetings with tech, or are you still sending emails and doing phone calls? And what we found broadly is that firms that incorporate more tech are happier, even, this is an important note, even when the tech is not that integrated. Integration was still the biggest factor, but doing more things with tech, even if we have to swivel around across different systems, still on average led us for greater satisfaction than not having the tech and saying, well, if it's not integrated, damn it, we're just gonna keep doing it by hand. Any tech was still better than none. Integrated tech was better than non-integrated tech. The third and fourth factors we found actually really had nothing to do with the tech sophistication of the firm. It was the circumstances of the firm. So advisors who had more autonomy over their technology decisions, particularly those in independent RIAs, tended to be happier than those who were in broker-dealer or large firm environments where they couldn't pick their tech. Now, notably, RIAs were not like magically happier. In fact, they were pretty much at the median. But any advisors who were not in RIA firms and did not have control of their technology decisions, on average, got pulled lower. Not trying to knock any large firm platforms, but data was pretty clear that large firms are struggling to put the right tech in front of their advisors that their advisors want. The next factor we found, which was kind of similar, is what we ultimately dubbed a nimbleness factor. On average, advisors who are in small firms are happier with their tech than advisors who are in large firms, even and including amongst the RIA channel. Now, this was a little bit striking to us because a lot of the dialogue in the industry is the big firms have all these efficiencies, economies of scale, they can invest into tech, do the training, do all the other stuff to get the most leverage out of their tech. But we actually find that the opposite is true. On average, large firms are struggling to figure out how to effectively implement their tech across their ever-growing large organization and the number of people that are in the organization. Some do it better than others, but on average, the larger the firm is, the less happy advisors tend to be with their tech. The smaller we are and the more I can just buy, like, I want this for me and I want that for me, and if that is no longer good, I'm just gonna go get that other one and I don't have to go through like 7 layers of approval. And we don't have to have a firm project and committee meetings to do the next new tech, tends to go better. Not trying to knock anyone, I'm in a big firm too, I know how it goes. But our ability to be nimble with tech absolutely is showing up, or our inability for some firms to be nimble with tech is showing up as satisfaction. The last domain that we found, the smallest but it did show up, is what we ultimately dubbed intentionality of how the firm uses and implements its tech. So we actually had a series of questions about how firms manage their tech. It was things like, do you have a structured training process for new team members to learn the tech when they come on board? Is there someone designated in the firm that looks out at the landscape every year to review your tech and make sure you're still using the right things? So we asked a series of questions, just trying to understand if there were individual factors that really drove better adoption or better efficiency. And what we found is sort of any of that gaggle, any level of intentionality does tend to lift satisfaction scores a little bit. And firms that really have a significant lack of any intentionality are just kind of like picking the next new shiny object sort of thing. Sorry, you know who you are. Any of you, yes, my friend. Any of you who have a tendency to pick the tech a little bit too fast and maybe don't have the best intentionality start to drag the scores down, right? Team gets tired that they're learning a new piece of software every 3, 6, 9 months, and it seems like we never get traction before we go on to the next new thing. So these were kind of the big 5. Integration, breadth of tech that's being incorporated into the firm, and intentionality are what we call kind of tech sophistication factors. Those are all things that impact how we are using and implementing tech in our firm. And the other two, we sort of dubbed agility factors, this kind of having autonomy and being able to be more nimble. That's not really just a function of how I run my firm. That's often a factor of the decisions I make about how to structure my firm or who to affiliate with or who to not affiliate with. So we kind of put them in a separate category. Now, the next thing that we wanted to do was figure out how effective are firms at actually managing and using technology. At the end of the day, how strong is their tech implementation? So we took the 3 technology sophistication domains that we had just found, right? We know greater integration drives outcomes. We know incorporation of lots of tools drives outcome, and we know effective intentionality drives satisfaction outcomes. So we scored firms internally by how well they did each of these 3 factors. So firms that were not particularly good at any of them, we called tech essentials firms. Just like you buy some things, at least you're using it, but you're just kind of getting along with a couple of pieces of tech. Tech-aware firms were good at least one of these. Tech-enabled firms were good at 2 of them. And what we call tech-driven firms were nailing it on all 3. So you can see overall how this breaks down. Almost 3/4 of us are in the essentials or aware tiers. Most of us, even internally by our own resources, struggle to be great with implementing our own tech. So again, if you're feeling like it's a little hard to find the bandwidth to do all the things and keep up with all the tech, you are normal like everybody else. Relatively few firms ever really get to the upper tier here, and only about 1 in 14 firms were able to hit how we defined tech-driven, where they're really good at all these different domains. The technology is very well integrated. They use a lot of stuff that's integrated together, and they have a really strong intentionality about how they're doing it and implementing with their practices. And I will say disproportionately, they did tend to be larger-sized firms, not exclusively, but they did tend to be larger, simply because larger firms have enough resources to say, like, we're going to have a person whose whole job is picking the tech and training the staff. And most of us don't have team sizes to even be able to do that. So then we went and looked at, well, how do these firms actually show up? So first we went back and looked at their overall satisfaction, and no great surprise, really did find, I mean, it's sort of self-fulfilling by how we constructed it, the more tech-driven you are, the more satisfied you are with your technology. When you're using it well, we definitely do notice and feel like, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about my tech stack. Now, notably, even the most tech-driven firms still only averaging 8 out of 10. Not 9 out of 10, not 10 out of 10. If we were doing a net promoter score, these would all be passives. We didn't even get to promoters yet. But we do see demonstrably higher scores as we get more effective with our tech from a satisfaction perspective. So one more question I'm going to put to you. So as you think about using tech in your firm, often we've got something that we do that is frustrating. It's like the thing I do every week. It takes me maybe 5, 10, or 15 minutes. And at various points, you've had the feeling to the effect of, for the love of all that's holy, would someone please just make a piece of software so I don't have to do this anymore because it's driving me nuts. So I guess whatever that thing is for you, share out what you deal with that's frustrating, that's nicking at you for a couple of minutes every week. Would someone please just make tech to make this problem go away? We will also share these results with all the tech vendors, so maybe one of them will actually solve this. So we'll like crowdsource some tech innovation here. All right, so I see some data entry, a lot of emails. Takes time to write emails. Some of us are still 2-finger typists. Takes a long time to make emails. Meeting summaries, call notes, a lot of note-taking. Good news, there are note-taking vendors here. Tracking processes, scheduling not the client meetings, but the internal meetings, right? Couple of meetings a week. Most of us only have a few internal meetings a week, but coordinating across everybody's calendars is very frustrating. Some data entry showing up, meeting prep. So here's the notable thing. When we go out to advisors and we ask who's satisfied with their technology, the ones who are satisfied tend to be the ones that don't have very many of these. Right? Meeting prep was really aggravating. I got one of those AI note-taking tools, and now it queues up my prep, and it preps my post-meeting email a little bit faster because I also don't like email. I got Precise FP, it facilitates the data entry a little bit better. I got Calendly or Schedule Once, and now like client meetings just get scheduled. When we solve some of these things that are just sheer frustrations, satisfaction tends to jump. Here's the important part though. Nobody here takes another 20, 30, 40, 50 clients because one of these goes away. It's not that impactful. It really makes me happier. It's like the one thing that drives me nuts every week, but no one's capacity materially changes. And it's a really important distinction because we've seen a lot of challenges with this with a number of technology vendors and categories in the industry. We're advisors, we collectively say like we hate this thing, right? For most of the decade of 2010, onboarding was frustrating for everyone, and we all said, why don't we have cool, slick onboarding things like the robos? Right? They could open an account on a smartphone in like 5 minutes and have it fully funded, and I'm still faxing paperwork in 2013. So we all had these frustrations. Except then eventually all the tech roboed up. Now most of us do have at least relatively efficient onboarding tools. The custodians have rolled out various wizards and slicker straight through processing tools. And our productivity has not gone up materially. Because at the end of the day, most of us don't add that many clients. Like yes, it is really aggravating to spend an hour doing all this onboarding paperwork that just sucks my soul. But if on average I'm taking on half a dozen new clients a year, it's gonna save me 6 hours a year out of 2,000 working hours in a year, which is 0.3% of my time and does not materially change anything in my practice, aside from just making me happier because the onboarding paperwork was soul-sucking. And the reason why this ultimately becomes so impactful is when we then take the data back and say, well, let's look at the productivity of all of these firms. We find that being tech-driven is not particularly associated with any lifts in productivity whatsoever. So there's a lot of stuff happening on this chart. Let me explain what's going on here. So there are 4 different bars in each cluster. The bars are our series of how tech-savvy the firm is, from a Tech Essentials, which is the lightest blue, to Tech-Driven, which is the darkest blue. So for any particular cluster, as you move from left to right, you're going from the least tech-sophisticated to the most sophisticated. We're super integrated. We use tech for everything, and everybody's trained on it beautifully. The sets of bars is how much staff leverage the firm has. So we measure this pretty simply. Take all the people in your firm, total headcount of the firm, and count how many of them are not advisors. They, in some way, shape, or form, are a staff role that is meant to support and leverage the advisors. So if 30% of your headcount or less is support staff, you end out on the far left. Right, roughly speaking, you have 2 advisors for every support team in your firm. The far right are the firms that have the most staff leverage. If I go through that org chart, 70% are staff support, only 30% are advisors. So I'm roughly 2 to 1 the other direction. I've got 2 support team members for every 1 client-facing advisor. Make sense? So here's the takeaway when we look at the chart. If you look within any particular cluster, the bars are not that terribly different. It's not like within each cluster, as I get more tech sophisticated, my productivity like goes through the roof. They're relatively flat, and even ironically, but echoing what we saw earlier, some of the firms that are the most tech-driven actually have incrementally lower productivity. Right? They're slightly lower bars on the right than the left for many of these clusters. But if I just change which cluster I'm in, I go from less staff leverage to more staff leverage. If I go from, I've got 2 advisors for every 1 staff to 1 advisor for every 1 staff in the middle, my average productivity doubles. If I go further out and I have 1 advisor per 2 support staff, so I have a lot of people behind the scenes, my productivity doubles again. So staff leverage generates about 4x the productivity, and being more tech-driven has a flat to slightly negative impact on productivity. It's what we actually find in the data when we drill down to 750 plus firms. The tech is not showing up the way that we think it is. And again, it's not to say that the tech is bad or don't implement tech. There's no question we get incremental improvements. But you're not 4xing your client count because you saved 5 minutes on the email that drives you nuts, or 7 minutes on the data entry you can't stand, or even an hour on the onboarding process that's aggravating you for the half dozen new clients that come on board every year. What saves you time and lifts your productivity is when you just don't do any of that stuff because it's someone else's problem in your firm. And if they want to use technology to make themselves more efficient, more power to them. Delegation obliterates efficiency from tech in advisory firms. That's what this ultimately comes down to. By a massive off the charts, it's not even close, flatline versus 4x difference. Staff leverage trumps tech efficiencies. Because a lot of the things that we talk about for tech efficiencies are not actually things that save us 10, 20, 30, 40% of our time, notwithstanding how some vendors like to market. We don't actually spend a lot of time in the grand scheme of things on some of those tasks, but we are so eager to get rid of them because we can't stand them because they drive us nuts. It's the list that we shared earlier. And so the divergence is the tech that makes me less frustrated and happier in my firm every day is different than the tech that actually lifts my productivity, because the answer is it's usually not the tech that materially lifts the productivity. It's working with higher value clients and being able to delegate more. And that's effectively what we found for a lot of years of our productivity studies. So the chart you're looking at here, the line across the bottom is the productivity of pure solo advisors, no support team around them, just like them and the most awesome tech they can find. And as you can see, as we go from the least productive to the most productive, you get advisors who are making under 100,000 to ultimately median is at about 200 to 250, and the most productive ones are a little over 400. And then when we get to firms that have any kind of support structure in place, could be a big ensemble firm where you're part of a shared thing, could even just be hiring a handful of people around you as a solo, so you're not pure solo, you're the only lead advisor, but you got a team supporting you, the productivity triples. And we've replicated this every time we've been doing this productivity study back to 2018 when we did the first one. Staff leverage trumps technology, right? The difference between the bars is staff leverage. The difference from the left to the right is some combination of affluence of clients, tech efficiency, and other things. Teams beat tech alone. So what we find as we go through this, what I'd encourage is a little bit of a rethinking about tech. This is not to say that the tech doesn't matter and that the integrations don't matter. They are unequivocally, very clearly the primary driver of satisfaction. And in case anyone hasn't read any studies lately, for most studies, the number one reason why advisors leave their firm and choose another firm or platform is they're frustrated with their daily experience with the firm's technology. So the tech does matter. It actually matters a lot, but it's not a productivity thing. It's a satisfaction and retention thing. If you don't get better at the tech, your advisors get frustrated and leave. They don't handle more clients, they just leave with the ones they've got. Staff delegation and team building is what actually drives up the productivity, more so if you can help your advisors move to higher dollar clients with some combination of tech education, training, anything that lets them handle more complex, more sophisticated clients. Now, the other question that we had as we were going through this data, because we love to hack at our own data and try to poke holes in it, one of the following questions that came up internally as we were going through this is, well, if we're supposed to delegate things to staff, then maybe all the tech efficiencies just show up at the staff level, right? I don't save 5 minutes using tech because I don't save any minutes using the tech because I don't do that anymore. I handed it off to my team. But maybe if my team has a whole bunch of tech, they'll be super efficient, and then I won't need to hire as many CSAs and admin and paraplanners as the like. So we tried to see, do tech-driven firms at least save on the support staff costs? And we found the answer here was basically no. Doesn't show up here either. The average revenue per employee for super tech-driven firms that use all the fancy things well was almost exactly the same as the dude who has 3 pieces of tech and runs his business out of his Outlook sent folder. No material difference. Not on average. A few of us are exceptions above or below at any point on the spectrum. But on average, we found no material difference. Because again, most of what we do at the end of the day is the human tasks that fall between the tech. If you could really tech automate the majority of what we do, someone in Silicon Valley would make a super awesome direct-to-consumer tech version of it, and we'd all be out of business. The reason why we have not been knocked out of business through 40 years of tech iteration since the PC is because we get paid for the things that happen between the tech. Which means even the incremental tech efficiencies don't materially alter overall productivity of the firm in the aggregate. Right? If I've got my two-person team, my associate, and my admin, and we implement new tech and everything gets incrementally faster, I can't go from 1 CSA to 0.8 CSAs. Right? It just doesn't materially move the number. My CSA might go home early on Fridays and says I'm a great place to work because we're super efficient on tech, so she gets to go home early. But we don't see a material lift in overall productivity. At best, we only even get there when firms get large, right? I can't go from 1 CSA to 0.8 CSAs because I got efficient. Maybe, at least ideally, if I'm a big firm, I could go from 10 CSAs to 8 CSAs. Except we don't actually see it that much with large firms either. So the data you're looking at here, the horizontal axis, the horizontal axis is how many people work at the firm, just total full-time equivalent team members at the firm. And the vertical axis is the revenue of the firm. And you will notice there's a relatively tight relationship here between the two, right? In the simplest sense, we are a service business. You want to double your practice and double your revenue and double your clients, you are going to double your staff. No ifs, ands, or buts. If you are super efficient, maybe you'll double your practice and only have to increase your staff by like 95%. Congratulations, you didn't have to go from 50 to 100 people. You went from 50 to 98 people. You still pretty much have to deal with all the people things. It's not going to materially change your outcomes. Even when you do things like implement the tech to make the CSA slightly more efficient, so I only need 8 instead of 10, it's like congratulations, but the 8 need a manager. So now you need a full-time manager on top of your CSAs, and technically you got some incremental efficiency, but you didn't actually save on headcount because you had to build infrastructure of management around them. And that's actually what we see showing up in the data at large. So the chart you're looking at here now, the bottom axis is revenue, so just how large is the firm getting, and the vertical axis is the productivity of the firm. So as firms start building up to $1 million and $5 million and $10 million of revenue, we do start seeing a lot of productivity lifts of revenue per employee in the aggregate. You know, it's one of those, I finally get to the point where like, I don't have to do that thing anymore. I have a person that does that now. And the truth is I wasn't really that great at it, and it's now their full-time job, and they're doing much better. Right? I get someone to just handle all the payroll ops administration I couldn't stand. I get someone that can just implement all the tech in the firm and make sure that it's running really well to get the efficiencies that we can. I get a director of financial planning to train the financial advisors so I don't have to do that anymore. I get a full-time dedicated trader who actually does trading execution much better than me trying to do it on my smartphone during breaks. So as firms scale up, particularly to $1 million and $5 million and $10 million, a lot of role specialization starts to emerge within the firm. We build some core infrastructure of systems and process, and we do start to see lifts in productivity on average. And then it starts getting messy and complex. And firms north of about $1 billion in assets, so roughly 10 million of revenue, if you want to take a 1% revenue yield estimate, actually start having revenue productivity go down. Now, this is striking relative to the industry dialogue, which is big firms have economies of scale and are more productive and can do all these better things because they have all this size. That's actually not what we're seeing at all in the data. As firms get bigger, they have to build a whole bunch of administrative layers and infrastructure, not in a negative like bureaucracy way, just like there's so many CSAs, we need a manager of the CSAs, and there's so many financial planners, we need a director of financial planning, and there's so many departments, we need like 2 or 3 executives who cost $200,000 to $300,000 and don't produce a freaking dime of revenue, but apparently I'm supposed to have them to manage my firm because there's so many stinking people to manage. And those are ultimately the crucial infrastructure layers that get built as firms get larger. I mean, it is a reality. We are a people business, and the more people you put in, the more management infrastructure you need in order to manage them well. But those tend to be non-revenue producing positions, and I need them on top of the advisors and all the people that do the things for clients in the firm, which means that infrastructure building layer tends to actually start pulling staff productivity down. Not horribly. These are all still wonderfully profitable firms. People make many, many millions of dollars. It's going well in the grand scheme of things. No boo-hoo. But economies of scale, the way that we tend to talk about it in the industry, do not actually show up when firms get larger. Productivity numbers tend to go down, at least in terms of revenue per employee. Overhead expense ratios often go up. A lot of small to mid-sized firms might be 30 to 40% in overhead expenses. Really large firms are often like 37 to 42. It's not hugely higher, but it creeps up because there's a lot of infrastructure to manage as firms get larger. Now, to be fair, we didn't have a lot of firms in our data set going materially above 30 million in revenue, so you're probably talking like $4 or $5 billion firms and up. So maybe this turns up again. I'm hopeful for their sake that it does. Eventually, we'll have more data and delve into it. But approximately 99.9% of us fall somewhere on this chart. Very, very few of us built individual firms that are doing more than 25, 30 million of revenue. And this is the flow for most of us. So a couple of takeaways as we come to the end that I hope you draw from this. Number one, tech that lets you get higher value clients is better than going for tech that increases capacity by a very significant margin. Number two, integrations matter, but it's not a capacity thing, it's a satisfaction retention thing. If your advisors don't like the tech experience, they tend to look for greener pastures because those one-off things that we all listed at irk us, eventually if that irks you enough, you just peace out. The productivity lever is not tech, it's staff. It's not being faster at the task, it's delegating to someone else so you don't have to do it at all, nor do you have to manage the tech or learn the tech. You can even be tech ignorant if you want, just have smart techie people around you. It works amazingly well. That's why the tech essentials people that have like 2 pieces of software and manage their business out of their email inbox are so wildly successful in many cases because they just get people around them that figure out the rest of the tech stuff so they don't even have to learn it. And as you get larger, tech does become necessary as a reinvestment mechanism to avoid what I effectively now calling organizational entropy. So entropy is the tendency things to move towards less organized chaos over time if not exerted upon by an outside force to retain the order. And the practical reality is as firms start scaling up and get to 10, 20, $30 million of revenue, some bits of organizational entropy start creeping in. There's a lot of people to manage, and at the end of the day, it's a people business. If you don't manage them well, they tend to leave. And so the layers of both tech infrastructure and management infrastructure that you have to put in place tends to actually incrementally drag down firms' productivity while they go through that scaling phase. But you do have to make those investments. If you don't, entropy takes over and things chaos shatter apart. So it's not even to say that tech reinvestments aren't important to maintain some level of efficiency, but you're not investing in a tech to lift your client capacity. You're investing in tech to avoid having it degrade as you just have to deal with the fact that there are more people on the team to manage to. So I saw lots of people taking pictures. If you actually want full copy of the slides, full copy of the study, just we have them there. You can do the texty thing now, text AdvisorTech to 33777, and it'll send you a follow-up. We don't put you on a list unless you ask us to. It's literally just an email delivery if you want a copy of the slides and the whole tech study. So I hope this has been helpful as food for thought. I know we have to move on to the next session soon. So just if people have questions, I'll hang out by this cool-looking vehicle device if people want to ask. But thank you very much for your time this morning.